Alright, welcome everybody. This is GTN. Today's video tutorial, we're basically going to be going over the material editor in 3D Max. You know, a basic run through of all the the tools and stuff, or at least the ones you need to be familiar with right off the bat. So I'm going to go ahead and launch up 3D Max here. As you can see here, I got a regular scene. Some of these models seem probably familiar to you if you were in my modeling class. Got a basic dresser, just a simple like oil drum, and a wall and a ground. Alright, before we get into that though, we're going to kind of give a rundown, like I said, of the material editor. And then also, if you notice here, I have a camera set up in the scene, so if I hit P, I'm back in perspective, and then you can see the whole setup right there. Alright, I'm just going to go ahead and hit C to go back in camera mode. Alright, to get to our material editor, you're going to hit M. Alright, right off the bat, I'm in 2011, so I'm in classic or compact material mode. Chances are you might be in this mode. That's the new 2011 version. Like I said, it's pretty neat. But like for this video, so I'm just going to go ahead and go old school. I'm saying a lot, huh? Anyways, let's go back to compact material editor. Alright, so some of the most important things that you need to know about this. First of all, we all know M now is our hotkey for material editor. Also, to open up your material editor, you can go to, I believe it's right here. That's the icon for it. Just click that in case you somehow miraculously forget what the M key is for. Alright, also right over here you're going to notice these little gray spheres. These are known as shaders, and there's quite a few of them. If you go to the options tab, you can see cycle 3x2, 5x3, and 6x4. So, and otherwise your hotkey is X. So if I hit that, notice I'm able to fit more in there. And if I hit X again, I'm shuffling through. Basically, I can go X, shuffle through. A lot of times I do work in this mode. But as you can see, we have 4 down, and I believe, 6 across for 24 slots. And that's for 24 materials. Now, one thing, I want you to understand that you can never run out of materials. Even though there's only 24 slots here. The first one I tend to never use. It's probably a good habit to never use the first one, because I always drag that shader, onto my objects for a default look. And so if I were to drop a material on there, it would throw it on everything. So I don't want to do that. So you'll notice I'll be over here, clicking on some of these blank ones over here. All right, so just to show you, a quick way of how to get more shaders. I'm going to introduce you to multi-sub-object shadering, and we'll come back and touch up on that later. But right off the bat, if I click on a standard default shader, this one right here, notice it says standard right there. So if I click it, this opens up the material map browser, and I can throw a multi-sub-object shader now. So if I click that, double click it, or click on it and hit OK, it's going to ask for to keep old submaterial. That means it's trying to keep that old gray one on there, which is fine. So I would hit OK. But in case, like, say you had a material on there and you wanted to discard it, say it was like a brick wall or something in that shader, you wanted to discard it, you would click here to discard all material. Anyways, I'm going to hit OK so you can, so we can understand this now. All right, as you can see, when I added a multi-sub-object shader in this slot, this basically put 10 new shaders in there. So in layman terms, that's basically, if I were to take 10 of these, too bad I can't hit multiple shifts, but basically 10 of these spheres, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then say the next bottom row, it's basically dragging them all in there practically and putting them in that one shader. So now you have 10 slots to work with. Now that set number right here says 10. I can actually click on that and say I want 100 shaders in there. So now I have 100 shaders to work with, including the 24 or the 23 extra ones out here. So that is your multi-sub object shader, and I can make any one of these into a multi-sub object shader. Now, the interesting thing about that, a lot of texture artists might say, "Oh, stay away from multi-sub object." It does have its purposes. For example, this one right here. If I decided, if you got like a real complex scene, say like it was a big living room that you designed or set design, and you had had all this stuff on the table, or say you had a dresser kind of like the one I have here, and I have all these objects within the dresser. So I'm gonna hit P so you can see what I'm talking about. I'm gonna click on this. Well, hold down Control just so I can grab everything within that dresser. And I'm gonna hide unselect. Oops, I'm gonna right click, hide unselected. So I am just working on that dresser. Now, as you can see, the dresser itself has, the dresser, the window, which is the element here, the windows, and then of course you had like 5 or 6 books. I don't know. That's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like 10 books in there. So if I want to keep everything organized and not eat up all my shaders here, I mean, that's right off the bat. That's 1, 2. And say I wanted each little book to have its own texture. That's, over 15 something slots I'm going to be using up. That's why we would use a multi-sub object shader. So I would actually take that one, name it dresser, and then within these multi-sub objects, I would start texturing it. For example, number 1 would be actually the dresser, and I might want to throw a nice wood texture in there, and we'll get into that later. I just want to explain the breakdown of this. And then maybe I would have this as the glass texture, which would be for the glass windows. Maybe the knobs were a different type of wood, so maybe I'd make them all the same. I'd call those the knob textures. And then each book might be different. Maybe I wanted to have each texture different. So I would be like, maybe I wanted a Harry Potter texture for one book, and another book was I don't know, Karma Sutra, yeah, something like that, and and then so forth. Whatever other books, Twilight. Nah, I don't read that, but anyways. So that way I can keep everything organized within this one shader, and that would be known as the dresser shader. So that can really come in handy, especially when you're having a complex scene and you got multiple things you got to texture. So keep that in mind, and the way you do that is actually clicking on any blank shader and clicking right here where it says standard, and then like I said, when this material map browser opens up, you have a whole new set of different types of shaders that you can work with. And like I said, we changed that one to a multi-sub object. You have architectural shaders, your blend shaders, your composite shaders, double-sided DirectX shader. A lot of these I don't use. You have the interesting ink and paint one in case you're trying to do cell shading. The ones I would say most commonly you would use would probably be your blend, maybe your blends. Definitely your multi-sub objects. Ray trace a lot. That's reflective materials. Your shell material you might do, like for certain cars and stuff. Your shell could work as for car material, and of course your standard shader, which is all these, and then your top and bottoms, which to be honest I never really use, and then your XREF material. To be honest, we're not going to get into that. Alright, so I just want to explain a little bit about the multi-sub object shader. Alright, so let's go ahead and continue with the rest of the material editor. Now, as you can see, here you have obviously materials. You got get materials, which is your G key. So let's hit that really quick. G. Oops, let me click on something. Get material. That just brings up your material map browser here. So basically, that's any kind of basically when you see any box beside any of these settings, like you see a little box here, that's telling you, hey, I can place a texture in there, like a map of some sort. You got your diffuse, which is your most common one. That's known as your color map. then your specular map, which is your highlights, and then of course, um, you have like your bump maps and gloss maps, and we'll get more into that. All right, right here, just to let you know, this is where obviously we can name our shader, whatever it is. Maybe it's ground or concrete ground or something. You might want to name it. Always name your shader so you know what they are. Let's see what else. We want to get all, like I said, the best way we're going to learn all this stuff is just by doing demonstrations. Like I said, I just want to give you a basic overall rundown. Let's see your options here. Let's see, we can click on options. These you might want to just kind of look over. Nothing too serious here. I mean, like I said, when you get more into advanced, texture, you might want to double check and look into here. All right. One thing though, let's see these blank shaders. Let me go back. Let me hit X so we can go back to a big screen here, or big shaders here. All right. Right here, if I double click that, it's gonna pop open, the shader window. And in this case, yours probably popped open really small. Mine was already set pretty large, so I can just grab that and scale it. And that's kind of good to know, so when you're like working with a texture, you can kind of see it, how it's shaping up. And that kind of coincides with this guy right here, your sample type. So, if you want to look at your shaders within a sphere, you leave it there. If you hold it down, you got cylinder, which is change it to cylinder form, which in case you're using things that objects that are more cylinder shape, you might want to see how the textures line up against that. And then of course your standard box shape, in case you're doing walls or any, usually good with mechanical type things that are boxed out. Just let you know, you can take you can take any shader and change that look accordingly. Very handy, keep that in mind. All right, right here, your background, notice when I click that, it changes. This is good for when you're working with glass materials or creating your own glass materials. You can, see like the transparency. So I'm just gonna move my mouse down here and turn down the opacity, and then you can see it's kind of transparent. Like I said, we'll get into glass shaders another time, or at least with our first lesson that we do together. Right now, this is, just a basic rundown. All right, another thing you want to be familiar with is, let's see, we have assign material to a selection. To be honest, I'm kind of old school. Here, I'm going to go ahead and close this out. What I normally do when I assign something to a material, I always just click on whatever it is and then drag it onto it. That's just how I've gotten used to doing things. So, other texture artists might argue with me about that. I don't know. I mean, it's pretty all universal, I guess. But like I said, you'll see me dragging a lot, so I hardly ever use that. But if you want to get familiar with it, that's fine. And also right here, the X, if I click that X, reset map materials to default settings. So that's great. So in this case, one of these were our multi-sub object. If I want to change that and reset it, I can hit X. This will cause all current map settings to be lost, or you want to reset. And then if I said yes, it basically resets whatever shader that is. And to be honest, I thought that was gonna change these. I guess I was wrong on that. But for example, let me click on him. Let me just change his color really quick, and I'll explain diffuses all that later. So if I hit X, this will cause the current map settings to be lost, or you sure you want to reset? And I hit yes, and it changes it back to gray. So it's back to its default settings. So that's your little X guy. This right here, put in the library, if you start creating your own shaders, but that's another time. Well, material ID channel, remember in our lesson plan, when you wanted to put like glow effects on certain shaders, these were the material IDs. Right here, the show standard map in viewport, very important, especially when you're using materials and you want to see them in the viewport on the object itself. You always have to turn those on, and then it would reveal the shader. And like I said, when we get into our lesson plans, we'll cover that. Another important thing I want you to understand is that, see this go to parent level? If I mouse over it, it says go to parent level. Right now it's grayed out because I'm on the parent level of that shader, which is right here. And the rule is you always drag your shaders or assign shaders to any object from the parent level. So you always got to make sure that is grayed out. So for example, if I go back to the sub-object layer here and I'm inside, say, the glass shader, we're in the sub-object level of that shader. But if I want to get back to the parent level, I click it and it raises me up a level. So to the parent level. Maybe I want to go into the Harry Potter texture, and then I'm inside here and I added some kind of texture in there, and I need to get back to the parent level to be able to assign it. I would go click till that's grayed off, and then I would go to the Harry Potter shader and just drag it to wherever I had to, like say, on one of these books or something. Alright, so yeah, very important you understand that go to parent level, because you're going to use it a lot. Alright, let's see what else we can cover. Alright, sorry man, I'm yawning. Long day. Anyways, let's go back. I'm going to click on the shader here, and just so I can get to these settings. I'm on my 05 default shader. We're going to work our way down the material editor here. I want to start off with this right here. You see we got different types of shaders, and by standard we're all on blend. And your blend and your Phong are they're pretty similar. They're basically used for like I want to say like plastics and paints, that really shiny coat type material. You'll probably, a lot of times you'll be using this one. I don't want to say 90% of the time, but you'll be using it quite a bit. And like your Phong as well. Your anastrophic is kind of like extruded plastics, or they kind of have an uneven look, I guess, in their setup, I suppose. Kind of like the way the grain of wood is, how it's kind of uneven. Like if you look at say like a piece of wood, 2x4 or something, or maybe a worn piece of wood, it might have a little bit of unevenness to it. I don't know if that made any bit of sense, but it's like the grain on the wood. Let's go ahead and go down to, of course, your metal. That's your metal type of material. I don't want to say like silverware or anything. That might be more of your strass. If you're working with like silverware or like worn type of metals, I suppose. Your ordinary blend is you're kind of like a skin shader, but to be honest, you have mental ray, and mental ray. When we switch this renderer to mental ray, which I believe might be in it, there's tons of skin shaders, so you probably won't be using that much. And then of course, like your translucent shaders, like your X-ray type of shaders and stuff. All right, let's keep it on blend for now. Let's go ahead and talk about these settings right here. You got your wire. As you can see, if I double click it, it gets in wire form. Now these are good for when you showcase models and you're rendering wireframes. But I have another video tutorial which shows you how to do a nice wire shader material. Just letting you know that's there. Of course, you got two-sided. Now you can see both sides of the material. As you can see, I have wire checked and I'm in two-sided. So if I click one, it only shows one side. Alright, you have, let's click that off. You have faceted, and then this will show it your material. Oh, that's face map. This will play in factor later on, I guess. We're not going to really use this too much. But your faceted, this is going to kind of put all your polygons at almost like a 45-degree type of angle. Alright, that's like your gemstones, your disco balls, or whatever. Alright, let's go to our ambient. Chances are you always want to keep your ambient the same color. So if you rarely ever want to change the ambient color. So for example, right here, your diffuse slot, this is your color swatch. So if I ever want to change a color of something, I can click it, and then you can see the color selector comes up, and then I can actually move around, change the color, the intensity of the color. So just letting you know that's there, and then you can see it changes up in here. And that is your color, your diffuse color. And notice the ambient is basically pretty much the same color. And then of course you have your specular highlight, which is your whites It's the highlight of a material, and you kind of want to keep that white for now. Your self illumination right here, if you crank that up, that's illuminates it. This is good for like that fluorescent type lighting and stuff. You know, maybe you're creating neon lights and so forth, and that coincides with lighting and materialing. So you know, just let you know your self illumination is there, and it's good to really pop out the texture in case it's too dark. I'm gonna tone that back down to 0 though. And of course your opacity, you can bring that down, and that's makes it translucent. So if I hit this guy, it's transparent. Alright, of course you got your specular levels and your glossiness. Like I said, your specular levels, let me crank this back up so you can see. And if I crank that specular, you can see there's going to be a nice little hot spot there. You never want your hot spot to be too blown out like that. For example, I crank that up. You never want your stuff blown out. You want just a nice little, maybe a specular or hot spot. Something on the lines of that. Alright, and then of course you got your glossiness. You can crank those up, and it's the more glossy it'll be. And then you can soften these up with the these settings. Alright, let's talk about let's see, we got extended primitives. What is this? We're not gonna really worry about this. I'm gonna minimize that. Your super sampling, I do want to touch up on this a bit. If you turn on enable local super sampler, I usually do that to all, whenever I'm working at max. This way when you render like reflective materials, you won't get that anti-alias effect. And if you know what anti-alias is, it's like that jagged edge look on your graphics. I always call it the Mario effect, or like the 8-bit Nintendo looking graphics on your hard edges and stuff. So usually I always keep that turned on. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize that. But yeah, definitely be familiar with that. Alright, let's go to one of our most important areas, your maps. Basically, everything that I pointed out here that has a slot to import a map in or a texture, you can access right here. And I guarantee half the time when you're starting to work with textures, you'll jump right into here. Because there's your diffuse slot, your specular, color, your level, your glossiness. Those are all your map slots right there. And of course you can check them on and off or tone them down with these spinners right here. Or the dial up numbers right there. You can crank them up and down, or you can manually punch them in. Alright, but like I said, your diffuse color is basically this slot right here. You got your specular level, which is this slot right here. And then of course your specular color, which is that slot right that slot right there, and so forth. So be familiar with this area. You will use it a lot. Now remember, the most important 3 slots of every object will be, I'm going to check them. So every material or every object that you material at least needs these 3 maps, and do not forget them. You got your diffuse, which is your color map. Whatever the picture it is, that you use. Texture. It could be a texture of a wall, texture of, rust or something. Alright. Specular level you need, which is the second map. That's the highlights. Everything has a specular highlight to it, practically. And then, of course, your bump map. This is the map that gives the illusion of things being rigidy, bumpy. Say like you texture a brick wall, it's going to look like the brick wall has displacement into it, like the grooves, maybe the dents and stuff. And of course you can see that's set at a default of 30. Alright, and your bumps and your speculars work off black and white type of maps, because they work off the levels of those blacks, whites, and grays. And I'll explain more about that later. But yeah, definitely these 3, every object at least needs those 3 maps in it. Remember that, don't forget it, it's important. Alright, so like I said, I bet most of the time you'll be working in this little area. Alright, and you know what, we're not going to worry about dynamic properties or DirectX Manager. Nothing with the mental ray connections right now neither. Alright, so that is pretty much a basic rundown of the material editor. Um, like I said, when we start getting into working with our materials, this will be a lot. You'll start to get a lot more familiar with this. Like I said, thank you for watching. Hopefully, you kind of understood some of the concepts, or some of the things I was talking about within the material editor. Just remember, it's your M key to open it up, and then of course every box here lets you know that you can put a material in it, or a texture of some sort. And then of course this slot right here, where you can access all your textures. At the same time, you can just drop them in there. And then remember, the most important thing is two things: showing your maps in viewport when you want to see it within the viewport. Plus don't forget about being able to double click on this to pop your material up. And then of course, always understand the parent level. You will always drag when all you're done doing your settings with that whatever shader you're working with. Always go to the parent level, and then you click and drag that shader from the parent level. And I just controlled Z back to the multi-sub object level. This would be the parent level. So whenever you see all these, see it's grayed out, that would be the parent level. And then, for example, if this was I'm inside the dresser shader, and I'm going to crank it up blue, and then I'm going to go to the parent level, and then I'm going to just, I'm in the sub object level. Let me go elements, and I'll grab just that one window. I'll drag that blue material onto that one window. So, alright, anyways, we'll get more into that later. Alright, well, like I said, thanks for watching. Hopefully I made a little bit of sense to you. And like I said, I'll see you in the next video, and we'll start knocking these materials out. Alright, until next time.